From the food we eat, the air we breathe, the land we dwell, to the health of our body and mind and the well-being of all things in the universe. Unlock the science with Chula Radio Plus.
Welcome to Unlock the Science. I'm Virada Salim. This is the first new episode of our second season. In this episode, we will talk about an issue most concerned to all of us in the world. How would our livelihood be beyond the Covid-19? The Covid-19 pandemic has devastated our entire world in 2020 and 2021 and is doomed to continue affecting all walks of life, at least in the beginning of 2022, due to its one variant after another. Officials of the World Health Organization, or WHO, warned in early January 2022 that the world could expect more coronavirus variants after having dealt with its variants of Alpha, Beta, Delta, and Omicron. In its course of wrecking the globe, the pandemic has changed the way we live, work, do our schooling, and do our social life. People have lost their lives, their jobs, their livelihood, and even the years they can expect to live. According to a report of National Center for Health Statistics, which is part of Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC of the United States, the COVID-19 pandemic drove average life expectancies in the U.S. down by 1.5 years in 2020 from a year earlier, marking the largest annual decline since World War II. Americans are now expected to live an average of 77.3 years, down from 78.8 years in 2019, according to the report. It also shows that the disparity in life expectancy between men and women grew to 5.7 years in 2020 from 5.1 years in 2019. From the years 2000 to 2010, this disparity had narrowed to 4.8 years, but gradually increased from 2010 to 2019. The report says the decline in life expectancy between 2019 and 2020 can primarily be attributed to deaths from the pandemic, as COVID-19 deaths contributed to nearly 3/4, or 74% of the decline. The United States remains the country with the largest number of confirmed cases of the COVID-19 in the world. Life expectancy also drops in United Kingdom, Russia, and many other countries due to the pandemic. COVID-19 also ruins livelihood of many people on the globe by hitting the most vital means to their well-being, their jobs. And it seems the vulnerable sectors of the population have been hardest hit. According to a report by Asian Development Bank released in December 2021, young people and women in Southeast Asia bore the brunt of job losses during the pandemic. The report finds out that people at the age of 15 to 24, who represent less than 15% of the workforce in Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, and Thailand, accounted for as much as 45% of job losses at the height of the pandemic in 2020. In Thailand, women accounted for 60% of job losses, including 90% in manufacturing in the second quarter of 2020. The pandemic also exacerbated growing inequalities between skilled and unskilled workers, hurting low-skilled workers as well as middle-skilled workers whose jobs face automation or being moved elsewhere. Informal workers, self-employed workers, temporary workers, and migrant workers were among the most vulnerable groups. Urban people have been affected more by the pandemic than rural communities because of population density in cities and their way of life. Those who live in urban areas don't have a backyard where they can grow their own rice paddies or keep their hens or hogs. But they need to go to grocery stores or supermarkets to buy food, ride on mass transport to go to work, and socialize with friends at restaurants or pubs. Restrictions of lockdowns and social distancing have disabled urbanites from doing their usual routines. The Zine, a world-renowned architecture magazine, has published an article on what life might become after the COVID-19. The online magazine said, people will prefer houses that have courtyard or backyard rather than apartments in high-rise buildings in avoiding contacts and using common facilities with other people. And more people will make their home as their office. Work from home will become more common for both employers and employees. Therefore, home will be equipped with better workplace facilities. Will this become new normal practice for city people? Unlock the Science editor and producer Sinfa Tansarawut talks to Associate Professor Dr. Apiwat Ratanawaraha from Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Faculty of Architecture, Chulalongkorn University, on his views on how our city living might become after COVID-19.
Dr. Apiwat, I think is it fair to say that urban people have been more affected by the COVID-19 pandemic than those living in rural areas? In your views, which aspect of urban living have been most impacted?
I think we have to go back to why we are in the city in the first place. Proximity is one important aspect of urban living. We want to be close to other people in the city. We want to be close to amenities, some services. So the problem with COVID-19 is that we can no longer be close to people whom we like to be with and close to the activities that we want to have in our daily life. So I think the most impacted aspect of the situation because of COVID is this sort of personal and social proximity that we require as we live in the city. And I think this has affected a lot of us, not just in terms of how we conduct our daily life, but also our psychological well-being as well. So yeah, definitely the proximity and as well as the well-being are definitely affected by COVID-19.
How about social or physical distance? Do you think people will become more cautious in terms of mingling in, big crowds, or big gatherings?
Well, I don't know. I think human beings, we are social animals, right? So already people are gathering in places, bars and restaurants. So I think people will probably go back to the way we were before COVID. We desperately need that. As I mentioned earlier about social proximity, we will go back to the way we were. We may be a little bit more cautious here and there. Some young people, especially children, may grow up, wearing the masks more often, and as well as they may, wash their hands more often. But in terms of mingling with our friends and family, I think we are social animals after all. So I think we will go back to the way we were.
Another major change during the pandemic is working from home. Do you think that more employer will allow the employee not to have to come into their offices?
Yeah, I think that will become a major trend after COVID. I mean, it's already the case, and it's already happening. It was happening even before COVID in certain industries like finance and IT. A lot of people had already been working from home or working from anywhere for a long time. And yet in Thailand, that trend was not, was not catching up yet. But I think with COVID, and now that everybody is pretty much working from home, not everybody, but a lot of people can work from home. Me, for example, I can teach from home. So I think the hybrid model of working both remotely and physically with other people present, I think that will be the trend. So I don't think we are going to go completely remote, but we will have more opportunities to work remotely. And same thing with classrooms, same thing with office works. And these trends, I think, will affect the way we think about office space, quite a big deal. A lot of companies, from what I've talked to them, apparently are not having people back soon enough. Some companies actually allow their workers to work remotely almost 100%. So I think there's definitely going to be some change even after COVID in terms of working from home and remote working.
And if home will become workplaces, as an expert in urban planning and policy, what do you think will be happening to all those new office buildings emerging in Bangkok and other cities in the world?
It's definitely a very challenging trend and challenging phenomenon that we are facing now. We know that Bangkok will have at least 2 or 3 million square meters of office space coming up in the next few years. And that's going to be really challenging for those operators and real estate developers because they had the plan to develop all these offices before COVID. And now a lot of people and a lot of companies realize that people can work from home or work remotely. So those office spaces will have to be converted to something else, or they will have to change the functions of the office space so that the space will be accommodated somehow. But I personally still think that we do need space to meet other people. So even though we may not have the same kind of office space like we used to, those office buildings will be occupied in one way or another. Now, the challenging part would be transportation. Once people realize that they can work from home, they don't actually have to commute, in the morning during rush hours to the office anymore. So that would be an interesting phenomenon to observe, how people will commute and how people will travel because of this new normal of working remotely.
That is Unlock the Science editor and producer Sinfa Tansarawut talks to Associate Professor Dr. Apiwat Ratanawaraha of Faculty of Architecture, Chulalongkorn University. We will take a short break now.
You are listening to Unlock the Science on Chula Radio Plus.
Tourism is obviously the hardest hit industry in the world by the COVID-19 pandemic. World Tourism Organization of the United Nations has declared that the year 2020 was the worst year on record for tourism. Its statistics shows that the world lost about 1 billion international tourist arrivals in each of the year of 2020 and 2021 from the pre-pandemic number in 2019. In 2019, there were 1.46 billion international tourist arrivals, or tourists with overnight stays. This number dropped to roughly 400 million in each of 2020 and 2021. The year 2021 saw only a slight recovery from the previous year. In Thailand, about 6.7 million foreigners visited the country in 2020. The number dropped to a meager 427,000 in 2021. Before the pandemic in 2019, almost 40 million foreigners visited Thailand, generating about $59 billion for the country. From these figures, it can say in 2021, Thailand almost didn't welcome any foreign visitors. It is very easy to imagine that any and all kinds of businesses related to tourism have been badly hurt, whether they are airlines, airports, hotels, shops, restaurants, and even massage parlors in case of Thailand. Associate Professor Dr. Apiwat Ratanawaraha from Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Faculty of Architecture, Chulalongkorn University, has done a number of studies on tourism in Thailand. He shares with Unlock the Science editor and producer Sinfa Tansarawut on COVID-19's impact on tourism and what could be some of the strategies Thailand could adopt in the near future for this industry.
Tourism has been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. You have done quite a number of studies on tourism in Thailand. One of them is Thailand tourism strategy after the COVID-19. Would you mind sharing some of the key findings in this particular study to us?
Yes. So one key issue that we were exploring in our research about the futures of tourism in Thailand is basically how much Thailand will rely on tourism for its economic development. In the past 20 years or even more, we have been really relying on tourism, and it's almost tourism is the cash cow of Thailand. Agriculture and manufacturing were the main industries for Thailand, but lately those primary and secondary industries were quite falling behind. So tourism became the cash cow and became the key industry for Thailand. Now with this COVID, we know that we probably are relying too much on tourism, particularly tourism in the sense that tourists have to come and visit Thailand for us to get income, to gain revenue. So the strategy for the future would be, first, how can we actually diversify tourism-related industries without relying too much on tourists visiting us? Meaning, we should be able to diversify the products that we sell to quote-unquote tourists without having them visiting Thailand. Now, that sounds like a strange thing to say, but imagine, for example, a lot of people love watching football matches of the Premier League in the UK without actually visiting the UK, right? So it means that the UK or England are able to sell their quote unquote entertainment products without us visiting England. That has not really been part of the strategy to diversify the tourism industry in Thailand. We have been really relying too much on tourists visiting us without diversifying the products. So one of the strategies that we propose to the government is that we need to be able to create more linkages between traditional tourism activities and other activities that we can sell our products.
In your research, have you really talk about some concrete product whereby Thailand can sell to foreigners without having them to physically alive in Thailand?
Yeah, we identified a few, but one of them definitely is Thai food, right? Thai food is known throughout the world. You can go to a small town in Iceland, for example, and you'll find a Thai restaurant there. So Thai food can be enjoyed without visiting Thailand physically. So definitely we need to be able to, we should try to link the supply chains of products related to the food industry here with tourism. I mean, for sure, you can enjoy Thai food in Thai restaurants in a lot of places, a lot of cities around the world. But sometimes I wonder how much we've done in terms of branding. We might have done a little bit here and there in terms of branding, but we could do more, and we could even not just being exporter of ingredients, but as part of our research, we identify one important aspect of this, which is standardization. Thailand should play a bigger role in terms of international standardization of food products, and that will help us being a leader, not just in terms of like Thai food is delicious, but we are basically establishing industry standards related to food. And that would be one strategic step that the Thai government should do from now. So far, we basically just exporting, maybe a little bit of doing branding here and there, but to go beyond that, definitely standardization.
Do you think Thailand tourism industry has been prepared for coping with a global pandemic?
Well, I don't think the world in general was not prepared, right? I mean, any industry was not prepared. I mean, even though, a lot of people had already warned us that this global pandemic could happen. Bill Gates, I think, I don't know when he was, saying that it will happen, right? So I don't think the Thai tourism industry was prepared at all. The thing about tourism before COVID was that we really relied on China quite a lot. And, now that we are in the, I would say it's the third year of COVID, we should know by now that we cannot rely on one single country, as a source of tourists for our tourism industry. The interesting part would be how would we balance, that mass tourism coming from China with people, possibly Chinese, but a little more well-heeled or experienced tourists who prefer something a little more niche, something more personalized. So our strategy for the future would really have to balance between not just China, but I think between mass tourism and between personalized, tourism experience. Not just about China. Now, China is definitely an interesting place, an important place for us in terms of tourism strategy, because China actually uses tourism or their tourists almost like as a geopolitical tool. China can actually say, all right, we're not sending the tourists to your country unless you do this and that for us, right? So we have to think of tourism not just a way to attract, visitors, but we actually have to think of tourism as almost like a diplomatic relation. So in our research, we actually proposed that the Thai government has to think of tourism in a sort of a bigger picture, use it as part of the geopolitical relation or tool.
It is very likely that COVID-19 will not be the last pandemic that humanity will encounter. According to an article published in the medical science journal Nature Medicine, it has been found that there has been an increase in the emergence of new infectious diseases, as around 30 new diseases have been identified in recent decades. This is a result of the changes in human ecology, such as rural to urban migration, increasing long-distance mobility and trade, industrialization of food production, and environmental degradation, including widespread forest clearance and climate change, which bring about more intensive people-to-people and people-to-animal interactions that increase the risk of pathogen transmission. Professor Dr. Thirawath Hemajutha, head of Thai Red Cross Emerging Infectious Diseases Health Science Center, Chulalongkorn Hospital, said in an interview with Unlock the Science in our first season show in September 2021 that new emerging infectious diseases such as the coronavirus are waiting to come out and wreak havoc in the world. He said that around 50 to 80% of the pathogens found in patients in Thailand's hospitals are unknown to the medical science community, but doctors treat the patients in the way that should be likely whether they are bacteria or viruses. So at present, we might have emergent infectious disease pathogens in humans already, but we are not aware of them. Therefore, we shall be prepared for dealing with new emerging diseases. Many pathogens out there could be just awaiting to become the next global pandemic. Unlock the Science would like to thank Associate Professor Dr. Apiwat Ratanawaraha from Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Faculty of Architecture, Chulalongkorn University, for his thoughts on urban living and the tourism industry beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. Since this is the first new episode of our second season, I hope you will continue to support us throughout this new season. You can listen to Unlock the Science on Chula Radio Plus at FM 101.5 every Saturday from 1 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. You can also listen and follow us on our website curadio.chula.ac.th and our Facebook page. Our show is also accessible as podcasts, including on Apple and Spotify. See you again next Saturday. Have a nice day.
Unlock the Science is edited and produced by Sinfa Tunsorawut